The night she struck me, it didn't feel like skin meeting skin. It felt like a mirror shattering in front of 300 people, every piece of glass catching the light, cutting me open in ways no one could see. The chandeliers blazed above us, dripping gold across the marble floor, but all I could hear was the hush that followed her demand. My sister Celeste had raised her glass, smiling like a queen, her voice lilting into the microphone. "Why don't you make this night complete? Hand over the keys to your cottage. Let us use it as a family retreat." Laughter rippled weakly across the room, but I saw her eyes. They were sharp, sober, and deadly serious. The words weren't a joke. They were a command. I stood slowly, feeling 300 eyes lock on me. My palms were damp against the fabric of my dress, but my voice was steady when I said, "That cottage isn't a party favor. It's not up for grabs. The answer is no." The air thickened. Her smile faltered. And then, heels clicking against marble, she descended from the stage, and before I could even brace myself, her hand cracked across my cheek. The sound was so loud it silenced the quartet mid-bow. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Someone gasped. I tasted blood, that I didn't raise my hand back. I wouldn't give her that. I just turned, pushed through the crowd, and walked out into the cold night air. Outside, the wind from the bay stung my face, cooling the burn on my cheek. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. For months I'd saved a number under a single letter just in case. Tonight, I pressed it. When the line clicked open, I whispered, "It's happened." Because the cottage, my cottage, was never just wood and shingles. It was built in 1899, perched on a bluff where the sea gnawed at the cliffs and gulls circled overhead. My Aunt Eleanor had been its last guardian before me. She had no children, so summers were ours, painting shutters, mending fences, patching the roof after storms. She used to rest her hand on mine and say, "You understand, this place isn't just a house. It's a heartbeat, and you're the one who knows how to keep it alive." When she died, the will left it to me. No one was surprised, except Celeste. Her envy came dressed as humor. Jokes about how unfair it was that I had a cottage and she didn't. Jokes that hardened into requests. First a key just in case. Then weekends when I'd arrive to find her friends sprawled on the deck, her husband grilling as though it were theirs. I stayed quiet. I thought keeping peace was easier than confrontation. But silence only fed her hunger. That slap in front of everyone wasn't sudden. It was years in the making. What Celeste didn't know was that long before her wedding, I had already taken steps. Papers signed in a lawyer's office downtown. A trust established. The cottage transferred into something she couldn't touch, no matter how many keys she demanded. And her husband, Victor, I had started watching him more closely. The way he talked about land values at family dinners. The way his voice dropped when he thought no one heard him, whispering about collateral and deals. I kept notes, dates, names, snippets of conversations. And slowly the picture came together. He wasn't dreaming of a family retreat. He was circling like a shark, calculating how to turn my inheritance into leverage. So when I walked out of that auditorium with blood on my lip, I already knew who to call. Janet, my lawyer, was on her way. And so was Detective Moran, the one who'd been quietly asking about Victor's sudden interest in coastal deeds. Inside the hall, music sputtered back to life, but the notes sounded brittle. Through the glass doors I could hear Celeste shouting, her voice jagged. "I'll get the deed tonight. She can't keep it from me." But the deed wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to something stronger than either of us. Law, ink, and trust. When Janet arrived, briefcase in hand, her eyes flicked from my bruised lip to the restless crowd inside. "It's time," she said. Minutes later, Moran pulled up, his unmarked car drawing whispers as he stepped out. Tall, deliberate, his presence was the kind no one could ignore. I wiped the last trace of blood from my mouth and pushed the doors open. The ballroom froze. Every head turned as we crossed the marble floor. Celeste's smile curdled when she saw us. "Why are you back?" she snapped. Janet's voice cut through the silence as she unfolded documents. "Celeste Harrow, you are hereby ordered to cease and desist all attempts to coerce or seize property belonging to the Harrow Trust." Gasps rippled. Celeste's glass slipped from her hand and shattered. Then Moran stepped forward. His voice was heavy, final. "Victor Harrow, you are under inquiry for fraudulent loan applications. Records show you attempted to use the Harrow cottage as collateral without authorization. Victor's face drained of color. His mouth opened, then closed again, eyes darting to the exits. His associates began to slip away, leaving him stranded. Celeste screamed, "Lies! She's making this up because she can't share." Her voice cracked, desperate. Mascara streaked her cheeks. But no one believed her. Not anymore. Vendors stepped forward asking for payment. Guests whispered in tight knots. What had been a wedding reception twisted into a tribunal, and I stood in the center, bruised but steady, watching years of deception collapse under its own weight. Celeste's eyes locked on mine. "You've ruined everything," she sobbed. "It was supposed to be ours. Victor said it was right. You don't even have a family." Her words were meant to pierce me, but instead they fell flat. I touched my swollen cheek, met her eyes and said, "You wanted my silence. Tonight you got my answer." The room shifted. The tide turned. And for the first time in years I felt the ground steady beneath me. The days after blurred, whispers in town, uneasy glances at work, but in the end it led to mediation. Celeste slumped across from me in Janet's office, her hair pulled back carelessly, her voice small. "I never meant for it to go that far," she murmured. I told her the truth. "You didn't want closeness. You wanted control." She signed the papers, her hand shaking, a forced apology spilling out in ink. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was relief. A fragile peace. Weeks later, I returned to the cottage. The wind off the sea rattled the shingles like it always had. Inside, I placed the legal documents in the safe, then watched a locksmith replace every lock with a keypad only I knew. Still, I kept one brass key, the one Eleanor once used. I mounted it in a shadow box above the fireplace, etched with a single word: boundaries. Not as a warning to others, but as a reminder to myself, because silence doesn't keep peace. It only feeds hunger. And the night my sister struck me, the silence finally ended. What would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet, or spoken out?